Welcome to Talkin SEC. Writer, photographer, and producer Phillip Jordan discusses the latest news and breaks down the biggest games with the best analyst around. Now, from Southeast Alabama, a state that knows its sports, here is Phillip Jordan.
Welcome, everybody, to the return of Talking SEC. That is right. You're looking at your phone correctly. Talking SEC is back. It's been a while, early September when I put the podcast on hiatus. I am glad to be back on twice a week basis with you guys. You'll get an early week episode recapping the weekend, and then later in the week you will get an episode previewing the weekend coming up. Guest on most episodes, once again like before. I'm glad to be back, guys. I don't know if you can tell, but I am very excited. I've been actually had some nervous energy about this, getting back at it, talking SEC football with you guys every single week, twice a week now. Now, before it was once a week. This is going to be a twice a week podcast. So very excited, very glad to be back. It's going to be a fun show. Matt Lowe from Lindy Sports will be on in just a little bit. And but before I do that, before we kind of jump into the show, I do want to say this. Well, first, remember, you can follow me. I am Phillip Jordan. You can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC, and you can follow the show on Twitter at Talking SEC Pod. But I just want to say a big thank you, and I'm really humbled by this, to all the people out there that have reached out when I put my shows on hiatus, particularly this one. A lot of people did reach out, and if I named all of them, we'd be here for a while. But if you're one of those people and you're listening to this podcast, I just want to say thank you. And it really is humbling, and I do appreciate everybody that said, we missed a podcast, we hate that you're shutting it down, we wish you were still doing it. And I did not make that decision hastily. It was one I thought about, and there were some other factors that I didn't discuss in that last episode when I announced I was stepping away from the podcast for a little bit. Now, the Phillip Jordan Sports Podcast, it's done. It's dead. I'm not bringing that back. That was an experiment I tried. I'm not going to, that's gone. But we're here, we're talking SEC. Got some other stuff down the pipe, too, on other sports-related stuff on a different podcast I may do and announce in a bit. But anyways, we're here to talk SEC. We're here to talk SEC football. We're into week 5. A lot of stuff is going on in the conference. It's very intriguing. And speaking to those people that missed a pod, a lot of people were hitting me up on Saturdays, or especially late Saturday night, or maybe go into Sunday morning and say, man, I really wish I knew what you thought about this. I was like, patience, I'll be back. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of lengthy talk on this one, just to kind of, because I have not been in this format to get to do this. So anyways, I'm just very excited about this. And if you guys are checking this out on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe, rate, and review. And remember, as always, like before, if you leave a review, I will read it on a future edition of the show. And I'm hoping to do some mailbag stuff on the podcast from time to time, too. So, like I said, you can hit me up on social media, either at PJordanSEC or at Talking SEC Pod. And you can email me at sportstalkphilipjordan@gmail.com as well. Now, we're going to have some new segments here in the show as I bring it back, kind of make it move a little bit smoother, I guess you would say. More formatted look. It's not just going to be the guest. That's kind of what the format was before, being the guest talking. But you're going to get some solo segments from me, and that is where we are going to debut my weekend observations.
It's time for Weekend Observations.
All right, first up on weekend observations, and this is something we'll do beginning of every show during football season. I may do some basketball stuff when football season's over with, so this segment can cross over to that. But during football season, of course, weekend observations will always kick off the early week podcast. So we're just going to go in order that these games happen. And the game of the week Saturday was Auburn and Ole Miss. Auburn wins this game 35-27. Auburn improves to 3-2. Ole Miss drops to 1-4 on the season. And look, you can't look at this Auburn season right now and think, man, this team, they're lucky they're not 1-4 or 0-5, but they are 3-2. The Kentucky game, close to halftime, they got help from the referees on a touchdown that probably should have been for Kentucky. Then you look at the Arkansas game with the spike, and that spike went backwards. Arkansas maybe should have got the ball. And then Saturday, when Ole Miss went up 28-27, they kick off the ball to Auburn. It looked like it touched Sean Shiver's hand. I guess the issue maybe not be with people, especially with social media world, that Auburn didn't lose the ball or Ole Miss got a touchdown there. I think the biggest issue, they didn't even try to review it. They didn't even look at it. They did not even really make an effort to do that. So that is the topic of this conversation. Of course, Lane Kiffin has made his opinion known about the referees. He did it Saturday after the game. He did it on Monday as well. So, and obviously with Ole Miss, look, they played great against Alabama. They just could not come away with a victory. They just couldn't match them at the very end with touchdowns. They beat Kentucky early in the second week of the season. They played well at times against Florida. Then he had that 6 interception game last week, but Matt Corral. And then this, so they're 1-4. So it's kind of like Ole Miss, you can tell they're close, but they're not quite there yet, getting these wins. So, and then that call there, has obviously got people, particularly in Ole Miss, very upset. I will say this about the game. I think Auburn had a better game plan offensively than they've had all season. They put Bo Nix in situations where he could be successful because, look, last week against South Carolina, he lost that game for Auburn. This is straight up. Auburn was moving the ball. They were dominating the game. His 3 interceptions equaled 21 points for South Carolina, and that gave South Carolina some confidence. They were back, got them back in the game, and defensively, they started playing better because they were getting those interceptions. The defense got some momentum. So Bo Nix, it was not a good week for Bo Nix. It's not really been a good couple of weeks for Bo Nix, which Auburn fans, if you follow them on social media, you see it. They want Bo Nix benched. There's a lot of them that do. Look, I'm going to just go and spell it out to you like this. In a normal situation, maybe you do put Bo Nix on the bench, but there's really nowhere for Auburn to go there. It's pretty much, it has to get really, really bad. And as bad as you may have thought last week was with the 3 interceptions, hasn't got that level yet with Bo Nix. But on Saturday, he showed some good things. He was 23 of 30. Look, a big thing with him is he's not been good away from Jordan-Hare Stadium. He was very good in this game. 238 yards, 1 touchdown, and he ran for another one and had 52 yards on the ground. But the key here for the Auburn offense was they run the ball. They committed to running the ball. 24 carries for Tank Bigsby for 129 yards. He had 2 touchdowns on the game. Then you throw in Sean Shivers, had 11 attempts for 60 yards. DJ Williams had some play there too. I think he had 1 carry too. He played a little bit there. So Auburn made more of an emphasis on running the ball Saturday. And that was big. And that set up Bo Nix for manageable situations. I made one heck of a throw to Seth Williams on the game-winning drive that put Auburn on top, and just a great run and play there by Seth. And then he gets a 2-point conversion. And then, look, Ole Miss did not do a good job at the end with game clock management either. And then you got your quarterback, Matt Corral. You can't run past the line of scrimmage like that and throw the ball. You've got to stay behind the line of scrimmage and just try to force something in there. Because when you took off and you threw it, that was in the game. But even if you try to run that, you weren't going to get in. It's kind of like Bo Nix the week before against South Carolina. Man, you just got to try to force something in the end zone, hope something happens. First, Seth Williams, just lob it to him, but put your team in a better situation to win instead of trying to run the ball like that. It did seem like to me Ole Miss kind of took the ball out of Matt Corral's hand, too. In the previous weeks, they've been throwing the ball a whole lot more. They were focusing more on the run game. They did rush for 283 yards on the game. Matt Corral had 88 rushing yards there. They did run him more, it seemed like, this game. And then John Rice Plumlee, he also got in the game. Auburn defensively, though, they're still having some issues, and we'll see how this develops as the season goes on. Obviously, I think they are missing KJ Britt there in the middle, and let's not forget Chandler Wooten, who is sitting out the season due to COVID reasons. He just chose to sit out, which he'll be back next season. Now let's go to the 2:30 game. That was Alabama and Tennessee. Alabama, of course, wins 48-17 here. You had to expect this, right? Did anybody really expect Tennessee to make this a game? And Tennessee going to the bye week now. Let's see what happens with quarterback there. Jarrett Garantano is just not the answer. And look, all offseason, I told you guys I was not buying the Tennessee hype. We have seen that story before. I was not in line with it. It just was not something I believed in. And their quarterback was a big reason why. Now, I know they've got some good players on this team. I honestly believe quarterback is what's holding Tennessee back. They should be better than they are. And an interesting stat with Tennessee. Now, at halftime, in Game 3 against Georgia, they were up 21-17, and everybody's like, whoa. And Garantano made some pretty spectacular throws in that game. In the first half, they went in with some momentum, like I said, 21-17. Since that game went to halftime, the last 10 quarters for Tennessee, they have been outscored 109-24, second half against Georgia, and then Kentucky last week, and then Alabama this week. So that is not a program headed in the right direction. I know Pruitt believes they are. Look, you are in year 3. Things should be getting better. Now, I do believe the quarterback is the big reason for that. So I would expect a quarterback change soon with Tennessee, but whoever you play next, if they have a bad series or two, are you just going to pull them like you did last year and even you did this year, last week against Kentucky actually, and put Jarrett Garantano back in? They constantly playing musical chairs for quarterbacks, so that's not good. They have to quit that and just consistency at a position. If they just had good play there, look, you probably don't beat Georgia or Alabama anyways this year. But you probably, better quarterback play, you could maybe had a better game against Kentucky and had a chance to win. And you could be looking at 3-2 right now instead of 2-3. And that 3-2 would look, I know it's just a 1-game difference from what they are now, but believe me, that would look so much different if that was flipped. Now, let's look at Alabama. Look, Alabama is one of the best 3 teams in college football. I'm not going to get here and say if they're number 1 or what. I do believe it's Clemson, Alabama, and Ohio State. Then there's a big gap between 3 and 4 right now. I guess if I would put a 4th team in college football, I've been impressed with Notre Dame. I know the Louisville game, they struggled a little bit. They looked really good against Pitt. They've looked really good in other games. They're really good on offensive line. Ian Book's a good quarterback. Defensively, they're pretty solid. I know this is an SEC podcast, and most people here in SEC country cannot stand Notre Dame, but to me, they're the 4th best team right now, and I put Georgia up there at 5. I think depending where they played, Notre Dame might could hang with Georgia and beat them. I mean, last year when they played, Notre Dame liked to beat them there. Now, but back to Alabama. That's where I was going to go with this. Like I said, game went as expected. Of course, the big talking point after this game is Jalen Waddle, the playmaker for Alabama, gets hurt, ankle out for the year. I don't think this really impacts Alabama much, like if they could lose because of Jalen Waddle. And look, speed recovery to him. He's got a bright future in the National Football League. They're good at receiver right now. When you look at Devontae Smith and John Minchie, John Minchie is leading college football, and I'm sure the internet will check me on this if I'm wrong, but 23.8 yards per catch. Mac Jones is balling out right now. Look, I'm going to say something that's probably going to upset some folks, but I do think the Alabama offense actually runs better now than they did with Tua, because here's the difference. Now, Tua is more physically gifted than Mac Jones, no question, and higher ceiling as a professional prospect. But I'll say this, Tua sometimes was too much on the big play, looking for the bomb, not the check down. Mac Jones seems like he's more of a patient passer. And yes, he hits the big play to the receivers, but also, hey, you got Najee Harris right there. Let's dump the ball off to him. For Alabama, yeah, you can try to stop the pass game, and you ain't got to do it with Najee Harris, who has 14 rushing touchdowns on the year. So this game went to be expected. Now, Alabama next has Mississippi State. They're going to blow them out. Mississippi State offensively, since that LSU game, look, everybody's dropping 8 in coverage. Mississippi State has not adapted or adjusted to what the rest of the SEC is doing to them. Tennessee, like I said, is off. They will play Arkansas next. Press with Arkansas, I'll get to them probably in the end of the week show, and I'm sure me and Matt will probably touch on the Razorbacks as well. Now, Kentucky and Missouri. I will be honest with you. Going into this, I would pick Kentucky. I thought, yeah, Kentucky looked really good against Tennessee last week. Defense is really good. They like to run the ball. You know, Missouri gave up a lot of yards to LSU, which LSU is pretty solid offensively this year. And that's the thing with LSU. And just real quickly, then we're going to get to LSU, South Carolina after this. LSU's offense hasn't been a problem this year, which is, I'm just going to save it there. But Missouri played a great game here. Wins 20-10. They improved to 2-2. They started 0-2 on the year. Kentucky drops to 2-3. Kentucky just some bad breaks. The Auburn game and then the Ole Miss game, missed an extra point in overtime. But I don't think this game was as close as 20-10 as indicated. When Missouri dominated the time of possession here, they held the ball 43 minutes and 10 seconds. Kentucky only had the ball for 16:50. Connor Bazelak, their quarterback, got to be impressed with the kid. 21 of 30, 201. He didn't throw any touchdowns, but he didn't throw any interceptions either. They are really putting him in good situations, I think. Eli Drinkwitz is with the play calling, and Larry Roundtree, good game, 37 yards, 126, and 2 touchdowns. And that's not easy to do going up against that Kentucky defense. It's pretty solid. But I kind of wonder with Kentucky, do they have some issues now going forward at quarterback? Because you saw in the game, Terry Wilson and Joey Gatewood both played. So I'm going in to their next game. They do play Georgia this week. Who's going to be the quarterback? Do you roll Terry Wilson back out there, or do you play Joey Gatewood, or are we going to see both of them once again? I think that's a big thing to watch out with Kentucky, and getting the running game going and playing to that defense is key. Against Georgia, I do believe this Kentucky team can make this game close for about 2.5 quarters, but I worry, will Georgia's ground game wear this defense down a little bit? Because on the flip side, it's going to be very, very hard for them to run against Georgia. And you become one-dimensional, then you put the ball in the hands of Terry Wilson or Joey Gatewood. And then what happens there? Can they compete? And for Missouri, look, they're playing at Florida this week. That's going to be interesting. I don't think they beat Florida. And Florida, it seems like forever since we've seen them on the field. But I was kind of thinking Missouri was going to be a really, really bad team this year. But you got to be impressed with what you've seen the last 2 weeks from this team and head coach Eli Drinkowitz. All right, last game from the weekend. You had South Carolina playing LSU. LSU wins this game 52-24. Now, the color analyst on ESPN for this game was Dan Orlovsky. Now, a lot of people sing his praises with the NFL stuff, and he's pretty good there. He said some stuff in this broadcast that just was, it's like, this is a guy that I don't think really watched any LSU games, didn't watch any SEC games. He just sat in the studio because they weren't actually at the game. They were at the ESPN studio calling a game. TJ Finley, tremendous game. This is a big kid. I mean, he looks like Cam Newton out there, as big as he is. He was 17-21 for 265, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Miles Brennan was out due to injury, but he was trying to get this whole thing stirred up about who should be the quarterback at LSU, and that he would go with TJ Finley because he brings a different element to the offense. And I agree. I mean, yeah, the running ability and the run game, and as big as he is, and athletic as he is, that's something difficult to deal with. But Miles Brennan has done nothing to lose the starting job. Not at all. And so to say you're going to bench him now, no, that's not right. Now, if he's injured and he can't play Saturday against Auburn, yeah, you play Finley. But if Miles Brennan's healthy, you play him. Coach Orgeron did say if Miles Brennan does play, they wouldn't be hesitant to put Finley in. So I do think this is now going to be something when Brennan does get back on the field, it's like, okay, I really got to stay on course and play my game. But their losses this year, to me, they're not on Miles Brennan. They are on the defense and Bo Pelini. That defense is getting slashed. And look, they win 52-24 here, but they still gave up a lot of big plays. They gave up 403 yards, 234 passing, 169 rushing. Colin Hill threw the pick six in the game that equaled a touchdown, obviously, and then the field goals missed there. So South Carolina had opportunities to keep this game close, and they weren't able to do it. Moving forward, the LSU defense has to tighten up because you got Alabama is not too far off. And look, we'll see what Auburn does. Can they, get their running game going against LSU? It's at home. Auburn hasn't beat LSU in the last 3 tries. So that's the game of the week this week. I'm thinking right now. I'll name my game of the week later on in the week on here on the podcast. But yeah, for LSU, they look better defensively, but still they gave up some big chunk plays. But they made plays, and at the end of the day, you kind of hold the team out of the end zone. That is a win. But I will say this one more thing on LSU doing. I'll be done here. They had run for 200. They ran for 276 yards against South Carolina for a 5.1 average on 54 attempts. Coming into the game, 3 games, they were averaging 96.7 yards per game. Now, South Carolina has a solid defense. I think they did good things against Auburn the week before. So that's nothing to scoff at. So that was a good performance from the LSU Tigers overall. But quarterback controversy, I don't think there should be one. Miles Brennan is and should be the LSU quarterback going forward. And that is this week's Weekend Observations. Everybody joining me on this edition of Talking SEC is Matt Lowe, Lindy sports writer and editor. And Matt, I do appreciate you coming on the show on the return episode of Talking SEC.
No problem, Phillip. You do a great job, and anytime, man.
Oh, yeah, it's always great to have you on. A lot of good insight when it comes to everything sports related. But it's been an interesting couple of weeks as we have got SEC going on, and we were talking off air. It's the SEC has kind of turned into the Big 12 a little bit this year.
Yeah, it has, and it's kind of surprising, but during this year, nothing is surprising anymore. It seems like, but I thought the offenses would have a leg up on the defenses, especially with offenses that return a quarterback, some starting linemen and maybe a receiver or running back or two. And obviously that's the case. And like we were talking a little earlier, it's just the defense, the NCAA restricts, how much contact can be made now during weekly practice and the targeting rules now. I mean, it seems like you can't make a clean hit on anybody anymore without being thrown out of a game, which I do not like. I think it's one thing, to deplete somebody when they're not looking. It's another thing if you're running down on a punt, per se, to cover a punt, and a guy puts his head down, and the guy running down the field kind of puts his head down, and you hit head on head, and then you're kicked out of a game. I mean, to me, I think 15-yard penalty on that, but I'm not so sure about kicking these kids out of the games for that, and they're just playing football. And, I also think, the penalties now, pass interferences, and I think, a lot of things are going against the defense already, and it's showing up early on. But it does right now, the SEC, yes. It does look like the Big 12, and their points going on the board like crazy.
Yeah, as we have went through 5 weeks of SEC football, so far this season, what's probably been the biggest surprise to you out of the conference?
Well, Arkansas. I mean, the way they're playing. I mean, Sam Pittman's done a terrific job. And, when I watched them play against Georgia, in the opener, I was just impressed. I mean, I think we all knew Georgia was going to win that game and probably were going to destroy them. But I just was impressed about how hard they played. And that's one thing that you like to see, when you get a new coach and you're trying to turn things around. How hard do the kids play? And they're really doing it under Sam Pittman. Kendall Briles has done a great job calling the offense. So I've been really surprised by them. And they brought Barry Odom from Missouri, and he's calling defense, and they're running a lot of zone, keeping things in front of them and making teams drive, the length of the field to score. And so that's been a big surprise to me. I think the lack of defense has been another thing that's been surprising. And, I would probably say I've been a little surprised about how Georgia's come out of the gate on offense. I thought they would be able to put up some more points. I think that's been the detriment to them, winning a national championship the last couple of years. Plus, they've had to play some great teams. But, I think they're going to need to get that side of the ball going a little bit more if they want to win the SEC, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and how much of that with Georgia do you think is quarterback? I mean, look, Stetson Bennett's played well. I mean, the Jamie Newman situation obviously hurt, and then you got JT Daniels there as well. But it feels like with them, I mean, yeah, Stetson Bennett is a game manager, but at the end of the day, you've got to beat Alabama to win the conference, and playing that style of ball, yeah, it worked for a half with them, but if you get in a scoring match to Alabama, it's kind of tough. And as good as Georgia's defense is, it was not good enough to stop that Alabama offense.
No, and Georgia likes to play when they're playing with the lead and they're getting teams in third down and Kirby's throwing the exotic blitzes at you, especially with their linebackers. Their linebacking unit is fast and athletic, and they're really good. And if they can, once they get you in third down and 9 or 8, they can blitz you, and it really becomes difficult to move the football on them. Conversely, though, when Georgia, just say for instance, they get down in a game 14-0, and they, can't really play that well. They can be patient and still play the running, pound it with a running game and go play action, but if you're playing a team like Alabama and you get down, knowing that they can score as much as they can, it really puts them behind the 8 ball, and I'm going to be interested to see when them and Florida hook up, how that plays out, because Florida's got a really good offense too, so I don't know if that's, I know that's Kirby's, MO. He wants to run the ball, play good defense, kind of control the game and the tempo of the clock, but it's tough for them to win games when they're going against these really, really good offenses.
Yeah, I know we talked back when the magazine came out, the preseason magazine, and I know a big conversation was going into the season, the Georgia-Florida deal, because a lot of people were picking Florida to win the SEC East because you didn't really know about Georgia with quarterback. The schedule early on looked daunting as well. But Florida defensively, kind of like the rest of the conference, most of these teams are not playing good defense in the SEC. Mm-hmm. Florida's defense is not really good. Now, offensively, they're one of the best offenses in college football. So, as we kind of look ahead for a few weeks ahead, where do you lean on that now between Florida and Georgia?
Well, I've always been a guy that leans on teams that play better defense, and will they make a change there at quarterback to JT Daniels? I don't know. I don't know. Watching JT at USC, he's a good player, but I don't think he's like an elite player. Or I think, Kevin Slovis beat him out there, so after he got hurt. So, I'm not so sure what they do. I do think, they still need to continue to be them and do what they do best, and that's run the ball and play action. And also Stetson in that game against Alabama, he had 4 or 5 balls batted down and threw 3 interceptions. So, I don't care what team you play for or what quarterback you are. You can't make that many mistakes in big games. I think we're seeing it too, Phillip. In these big games, you can't make mistakes, especially in the SEC, man. You just can't do it. That goes for any league. But, I would probably lean right now. We in the magazine, we picked Florida to win the East. I'm going to stick with that. I think Florida's offense is good enough to beat Georgia this year. But really interesting to see what Kirby does in this bye week and see what they do at the quarterback spot. Because, like I said, I don't know if they have that guy on their roster that's really if they're going to be able to plug in and beat Alabama in the championship game if those two meet.
You were talking about making mistakes. You can't do that, and that's kind of going to lead me into the next thing I'll talk about. Auburn at Ole Miss this weekend. Of course, Auburn wins that game 35-28. But once again, an Auburn game. And they're talking about referees missing a call. The Sean Showers on the kickoff, it looked like it could have hit his hand. They didn't review it and all that stuff. But, other than that with Auburn, it just seems like, to me, as someone that watches Auburn every week, they put too much on Bo Nix early on in the year. But it seemed like this past week when they do run the ball with Tank Bigsby, that takes pressure off of him. But what's been your take overall with Auburn this year and the play of Bo Nix?
Well, they look discombobulated at times, especially on offense. I do think here's the thing with Bo, and I know Auburn fans are seeing the same thing I am. It's like he just plays just out of control at times. What I think they need to do, and I thought they did a good job of it last year, if you're going to run the zone read stuff, you're going to run zone read and you're going to run Schwartz to motion and you're going to you got to run the quarterback. He's got to run the football. And Bo Nix is a good runner. The dude can run the football, and he runs hard. So I liked what they did offensively, running him more. I think when you do that, and let's go back to Gus Malzahn when he first got to Auburn. He would run the quarterback. And then, of course, you had Nick Marshall and you had Cam Newton. In that offense, the quarterback running the ball is essential. You have to do it. Or it's just because if you don't do it with a quarterback, when you go to do a zone read, a linebacker's making a beeline for the running back because he knows the quarterback's not going to run. So you have to run the quarterback in that offense when you're running zone read stuff, or it doesn't work. So and that's the thing that I'm seeing. I think defensively, they're running too much man-to-man coverage. Now they didn't do as much of that against Ole Miss last week. They kind of rolled out that 3-man front and were dropping guys back, and I thought that kind of threw off Ole Miss's rhythm a little bit. Of course, Ole Miss ran that wheel on the ground against them, but, I thought it was a good plan defensively. And, Auburn doesn't have any pass rushers. So when you don't have a pass rusher, it's hard to play man-to-man because nobody's hitting the quarterback. It's one thing if you got guys that can really get home to the quarterback and you're playing man because the quarterback doesn't have that long to throw. But it's another thing when you can't get to the quarterback and you're running man. That's another that I guess opens up a 50-50 ball, opens up a chance of falling down, opens up a chance for a pass interference, opens up a chance for a guy slipping down. It's a risky defense when you can't get pass rushers home. And I thought their offensive line played better last week. It's been playing, I think, pretty decent. Everybody wants to blame them for their problems, but I don't think it's all on the offensive line, and I'm seeing them, make some holes a little bit. But I'm gonna tell you that Tank Bigsby kid, Phillip, he's a real deal. He's a player, and I'd be putting the ball in his hands at least 30 times a game.
I look over at who his running back coach is, and that Cadillac. And, I mean, I know Michael Dyer was there, and he had a really good freshman year, and they've had other good freshman running backs. But I think Tank Bigsby might be their best freshman running back they've had come through there since Cadillac.
I agree with you. I mean, and I think he leads the nation in broke tackles. I mean, and my thing, too, or looking at Auburn, they get in the red zone a lot. They get inside the 10 a lot, but they can't score touchdowns. You got to score touchdowns. You can't kick field goals, every time you get in the red zone. And, I mean, I've seen they'll get inside the red. I mean, you run, take Bigsby. I mean, I'm not sitting there trying to say that Auburn coaching staff's not doing a good job. I mean, but I don't understand sometimes when you get in the red zone. This is Auburn for the last few years. I mean, you go back to some of the Clemson games, they get inside the 5-yard line at Clemson, they can't score. A couple of times they played them. You get in 4th and 1, you can't score, can't get a first down. You get a couple of years ago at LSU, it was a 4th and 1, and they try to run a quarterback and they get stopped. I mean, I can't even count the times that Auburn's had 3rd and short or 4th and short or being inside the 10-yard line and they can't score a touchdown with first down, on the first down. So they got to clean that up, and they got to put the ball in the end zone. I think they start doing that, they'll start, they'll be in better shape.
Yeah, and don't put your fullback in the Wildcat and expect him to throw it like they used to do a lot with Chandler Cox. Watching that used to always get me thinking, what are you doing? Just like you said, line it up and run the ball and get it in there.
No, I was just going to say, too, a lot of times they'll get down there, too, and they'll run a trick play. Mm-hmm. Like they ran the 2-point conversion at South Carolina with Pegues. You got a 300-pound guy back there, and you're going to run he takes a snap, and then he hands it off, and then they throw it. I mean, why not just run Pegues? You only need 2 yards.
Yeah, who's going to tackle?
And I never understand this, and I've watched it in college and the pros. It blows my mind how many games when somebody goes for 2, they don't get it, and then they're chasing that point the whole game. Or they don't kick a field goal. They try to go for it. When you're early in a football game and you drive down the length of the field, I mean, it's good to just take the points. Last night I saw it. DK Metcalf ran Buda Baker down on a great interception on the goal line. Dude runs all the way, and he chases him down about the 5-yard line. Seattle holds them, and then they go for it on 4th down. They don't get any points. And then that whole game, they're chasing that 10 points. Which they came back and won, but, to me, it's ball game, take the points. Worry about going for stuff later. I think it always comes back to bite teams, it seems like.
Yeah, it does. I want to transition over to Alabama and Tennessee. Look, I mean, I think everybody expected that this game would be a blowout. I mean, that Tennessee just is not good enough still to play in the same field as Alabama. They haven't beat Alabama since 2006. And just, a lot of people, there was a lot of hype around Tennessee coming into the season because of how they ended last year with the winning streak. Where are you at when it comes to the Tennessee Volunteers?
Well, I think it was a dumpster fire, when Jeremy Pruitt got there. I didn't understand the fire. They let Jimmy Brumbaugh go. I didn't understand that. The guy, he's been at Kentucky, had been developing really good defensive linemen at Kentucky, and he's a really good recruiter. I mean, I don't know what happened there. This is tough because, I mean, you look at Tennessee. I mean, they got a sophomore running back, Gray. He's a good player. Their 2 tackles are sophomores. I mean, the guy, he's been recruiting well. I mean, the guys, their team's just young. Mm-hmm. I mean, Guarantano, he looks good at times, but then he looks horrible at times. And the guy makes terrible mistakes. And I don't know. I mean, I kind of thought they would play Alabama tough a little last week. I mean, I just thought, they might have one last gasp in them. But, I mean, they got destroyed by Kentucky. They got destroyed by Alabama. It's guys dropping balls, making dumb mistakes. I mean, it's a lot of coaching, it looks like. But I do see has a lot of youth on their team. So I think that might have something to do with it too. But I don't know. I mean, you're also talking. I mean, they got to beat Florida, they got to beat Georgia, they got to beat Alabama. I mean, there's still ways for them to go. And when Georgia beat them, a couple of weeks ago, it showed that the distance is still there.
And when you look at Alabama side of things, I mean, the Jalen Waddle injury, it is a big deal because he is a great playmaker for them. There's different things he does. He's different than the other receivers they have on the team. But long term with him, especially if they play like a Clemson or Ohio State, they make it to the playoff. Do you think that his absence could become more important down the road in those type of games?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I thought going into the season, watching Waddle, I thought he was the best overall player in college football just because the dynamic playmaker that he is. I mean, he's so hard to tackle. I mean, he can score on a punt. He can score on a kick return. He can turn a 5-yard, out route into a 70-yard touchdown. Yeah, I think it'd be huge. I mean, I don't know. Is there outside possibility of him coming back? I mean, I don't know. I mean, he could come back if it heals properly. I mean, we still got a ways to go before the playoff. I mean, I don't think he'll be back, but if he is, that would be huge. But yeah, man, I mean, that's a really big loss. I mean, but the Slade Bolton kid looked really good. I mean, and Mechie's emerged there. And the thing with Alabama too, Phillip, is, I mean, what defensive line is gonna beat up on Alabama's offensive line?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they saw the best defensive line in the country in Georgia, and they dominated. I mean, so name me. I mean, I watched Ohio State's D line against Nebraska, and you lose a guy like Chase Young. I mean, he's an animal. I mean, I don't know if they're good enough. And I think Clemson's defense, though, with Brent Venables, and they have the size. I mean, I think Clemson, and the coaching power on that side of the ball that might give Alabama problems. But I mean, I don't think, maybe a rematch in the championship game, Kirby will change some stuff up, and playing in that dome over there in Georgia, which is a home field advantage. I mean, maybe Bulldogs could get them in that rematch. I mean, I don't know, but it was kind of like last year watching what I said about LSU when they played Auburn. Auburn had the best defensive line in the country, and I thought that if LSU could get by Auburn, they weren't going to lose because they weren't going to see a line that can put pressure on Burrow. I mean, and Auburn's defensive line gave him hell last year, and they almost pulled the upset. But I just don't know if anybody's defensive line of college football is going to be able to overpower Alabama's offensive line. And if that's the case, I mean, Mac Jones, we're seeing it. I mean, the kid could put the ball on the money. I mean, and they got an array of weapons. See, I mean, Forrestall's a good player. Got Najee out of the backfield. But it's going to be tough to slow them down. And I'm going to tell you what, Steve Sarkisian is calling some plays.
Yeah, he is.
Their play calling has been fantastic. And that's another huge difference that I see of Alabama and say Auburn, for instance, is just the play calling, the creativity. It seems like they never call the same play either. It's crazy. I mean, it's been really, really good.
Yeah, it has, and I'm with you. I do not see, especially the SEC, you talking about defensive lines. I mean, who's going to touch Max Jones, much less, sack him? But it's interesting, and it's 2020, so we don't know. Anything can happen, I guess. And Matt, before I let you go, I do want to say I'll ask you, over there at Lindy Sports. I know y'all got the college basketball magazine out. Do you guys got any other cool things y'all got going on right now over at Lindy Sports?
Yeah, well, actually, we're putting together a LA Dodgers World Series special edition that we're hoping they wrap up. We're not doing one on Tampa, but just because of their fan base. But we're working on that, and the college basketball book's already out. So, and when the college football season starts wrapping up, we'll start working on a book for the winners there, and we do fantasy baseball and some other things like that. Towards the end of the year. But, yeah, working on that Dodgers magazine, hoping they win it. It'll be the first time since 1988. I'm going to tell you, I mean, I don't know if you're a baseball fan, but this Dodgers team, the way they work pitchers, and I haven't seen a whole many baseball teams that can work counts and foul off balls and just challenge pitchers the way this Dodgers group does. I mean, it's unbelievable to watch, and they can hit.
Yeah, it feels like with the Dodgers, they've been there almost every year, and it feels like this is they're finally going to maybe get that championship, because that's been talked about, all the talent they've had for several years, but haven't been able to get it. But maybe they'll be able to get that championship this year. Man,
yeah, I mean, it looks that way, and I hate that they knocked out my Braves the way they did. I mean, that was but being an Atlanta fan, I'm getting used to it, bro. I mean, I'm used to a heartache. It seems like it happens on a yearly basis. So it's just unbelievable, man. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Anyways, so we'll see how that goes. And again, Matt, I do appreciate you coming on the show. And for you, if listeners want to follow you online, where can they find you?
Yeah, man, I'm on Matt Lowe 777 at Twitter. I'm on LindySports.com, and of course I write in our magazine. So you can find me there. And buddy, it's good talking with you again. And we'll see how the rest of the season shakes out. I think it could get kind of crazy here towards the end, but we'll see.
Absolutely. With more and more teams start to play again, also nationally, all over the country. Big Ten, Pac-12 is coming up soon. It's going to be interesting. And Matt, once again, I do appreciate you coming on the show, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime down the road.
All right, buddy. Take care. Talk to you soon.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Talking SEC. Really felt good to be back this week. And as I told you on the top, the opening was going to be long because I had a lot to get out of my system when it comes to SEC football so far this season. And I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Matt Lowe. Really, really fun talking with Matt about all things SEC football. We'll be back later on in the week. We'll be joined by Coach Max Howell. We're going to preview this upcoming weekend's games. You'll get my picks and get Coach's thoughts on all going on around in the SEC and all the games, the big games, this coming weekend. You can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. You can find the show on Twitter at Talking SEC Pod. Of course, the podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all your favorite podcast platforms. And if you are on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe, rate, and review. You leave a review, I will read it on a future edition of the show. Talk to you guys later in the week. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Talkin SEC. Follow Phillip on social media at PJordanSEC and the show at Talkin SEC Pod. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcast. We'll see you next time when we're talking SEC.